Some cities attract people, others push them out. Today, we're talking about 5 U.S. cities where people aren't just moving, they're escaping. This isn't opinion, it's population data, cost of living, and one simple truth. When enough people leave a city, it's not an accident. I'm Senior State. Let's talk about where America is quietly losing people. San Francisco used to be the city everyone wanted to move to. Now it's the city people quietly plan their exit from. For decades, San Francisco sold a very specific dream: innovation, culture, diversity, and opportunity. If you made it here, you made it anywhere. But today the question isn't, can you make it in San Francisco? It's, why would you keep trying? Let's start with the obvious: housing. San Francisco didn't just become expensive, it became hostile to the middle class. Home prices soared beyond reach, rent followed, and suddenly normal people were doing math that never worked. Teachers, nurses, small business owners, the very people a city actually needs, pushed out by a market that stopped caring if they stayed. When a city requires a 6-figure salary just to live uncomfortably, something is broken. And then there's the cost of everyday life. Groceries cost more, gas costs more, utilities cost more, taxes cost more. San Francisco isn't just expensive, it charges you a premium to tolerate it. At some point, residents start asking a dangerous question: what am I actually getting for this? For many, the answer is less than before. Public safety has become a growing concern. Not necessarily violent crime everywhere, but visible disorder, theft, vandalism, and a sense that rules are optional. When people stop reporting crime because they assume nothing will happen, trust is already gone. A city doesn't need chaos to lose residents. It just needs people to feel like no one's in control. Then came remote work. And that changed everything. San Francisco's biggest advantage used to be proximity. You had to be there. Now you don't. Once tech workers realized they could earn the same salary from Texas, Arizona, or even another country, the emotional attachment disappeared fast. Why live in a tiny apartment, pay premium prices, and deal with daily frustration when you don't have to? Businesses noticed too. Major companies downsized offices, relocated, or left entirely. Small businesses followed. Foot traffic dropped. Downtown corridors that once felt alive started feeling empty. A city built on momentum doesn't age well when the momentum stops. And here's the uncomfortable truth. San Francisco didn't lose people because it became ugly. It lost people because it became exhausting. Every problem feels harder, every errand takes longer, every improvement feels delayed by bureaucracy. When residents feel like they're fighting the city instead of living in it, they leave. This isn't a collapse story. It's a slow bleed. Young professionals arrive, stay a few years, then move on. Families leave first, then retirees, then anyone who values space, stability, or predictability. What's left is a city increasingly polarized between extreme wealth and everyone else. And yes, San Francisco still has strengths, talent, history, natural beauty, global influence. But cities don't survive on reputation alone. They survive when normal people can build normal lives there. Right now, too many people have decided San Francisco no longer lets them do that. So when you hear that people are leaving San Francisco, don't think of it as failure. Think of it as feedback. Moving trucks don't lie, and neither do empty apartments. San Francisco didn't suddenly change. People just stopped pretending the trade-off was worth it. Chicago is a city people don't want to hate, and that might be its biggest problem. Because Chicago has everything a great American city is supposed to have: world-class architecture, a legendary food scene, cultural weight, history. Yet year after year, people keep leaving. Not in a rush, not in panic, just steadily. And that kind of departure is harder to fix. Let's start with the numbers. Chicago has been losing population for years. Not because no one ever moves in, they do, but because more people decide to leave than stay. That's not a trend you ignore. That's a message For many residents, the breaking point is cost. Not because Chicago is the most expensive city in America, but because it feels expensive without feeling rewarding. Property taxes climb, sales taxes stack, fees appear everywhere. You don't just pay to live in Chicago, you pay to keep living there. And housing tells the same story. Some neighborhoods are thriving, others are stuck, many are declining. Families look at their tax bills, school quality, and safety, then look across the state line, Indiana, Wisconsin, Michigan. Suddenly, leaving doesn't feel dramatic, it feels logical. Crime is impossible to ignore, not just the headlines, the daily reality. You don't need to live in the most dangerous neighborhood to feel the impact. Carjackings spread, thefts increase, random violence becomes a background concern. When people start adjusting their routines around safety, quality of life is already declining. And here's the part that frustrates residents the most. They love Chicago, they love the summers, they love the lake, they love the neighborhoods with real character. But love doesn't cancel stress. Illinois adds another layer to the problem. State-level taxes, long-term debt, pension obligations that don't go away. People don't study public finance, they feel it. In higher bills, in shrinking services, in constant political gridlock. Eventually, people decide they're done paying for problems they didn't create. Remote work made that decision easier. You can now keep your job and lose your Chicago address. You can trade winters for warmer states, high taxes for lower ones, stress for space. And once that option exists, many people take it. Businesses follow people, not the other way around. As residents leave, local spending drops, small businesses struggle, downtown recovery stalls. A city that depends on density suffers when density fades. Chicago's biggest challenge isn't that it's broken, it's that it's tired. Residents are tired of excuses, tired of promises, tired of hearing that things will get better someday. Cities don't empty out because of one issue. They empty out because nothing ever feels solved. And yet, Chicago still matters. It still has talent, still has infrastructure, still has potential. But potential doesn't pay the bills. People don't leave Chicago because they want to. They leave because staying feels like carrying extra weight. So when you see Chicago losing residents, don't assume collapse. Assume calculation. People run the numbers. They weigh the stress. And then they choose somewhere simpler. Chicago isn't being abandoned. It's being outgrown by the people who once believed in it. New York City doesn't need an introduction. It needs a reality check. This is the city people move to with a plan and leave with a lesson. For over a century, New York sold the ultimate promise. If you can survive here, you can survive anywhere. But surviving and thriving are not the same thing. New York still attracts dreamers, artists, immigrants, young professionals. What it doesn't keep is families. And that tells you everything. Let's talk about space. Not luxury, just space. In New York, space is a privilege. You pay more for less. And then you pay more again. Tiny apartments, paper-thin walls, rents that rise faster than wages. At some point, people stop calling it character and start calling it unsustainable. Cost of living is the silent pressure that never lets up. Food costs more, transportation costs more, childcare costs more, taxes cost more. New York doesn't just test ambition, it taxes it. Then came remote work, and New York lost its biggest weapon. You no longer had to be here to succeed. The job stayed, the paycheck stayed, the address became optional. And when people realized they could live anywhere else, many did. The exodus wasn't dramatic. No mass panic, just quiet decisions. A lease not renewed, a moving truck at night, a goodbye that didn't feel final, until it was. Public safety shifted the mood. Not everywhere, not all at once, but enough to change behavior. People became more alert, more cautious, less relaxed. When a city makes you tense by default, it drains you. And yet, New York still works. For a while, your 20s, maybe your early 30s, but then life expands, careers stabilize, families grow, and suddenly New York feels less like a dream and more like a constraint. Suburbs became the exit plan. Long Island, New Jersey, Connecticut, or sometimes not even close. Florida, Texas, North Carolina, places where your money stretches instead of suffocates. Businesses adapted too. Office space shrank. Hybrid work took over. Entire floors went dark. A city built on constant motion struggles when motion slows. New York's problem isn't relevance, it's friction. Every part of life takes effort, time, energy, money. People don't leave because they hate New York. They leave because they're tired. And here's the truth nobody likes to say out loud. New York is still amazing, just not forever. It's a chapter, not a destination. So when you hear that people are leaving New York City, don't panic. This isn't the end, but it is a signal. A signal that when ambition no longer requires a specific zip code, cities that demand everything must start giving something back. New York will survive. It always does. But the people who leave, they're not failing. They're graduating. Los Angeles sells a lifestyle before it sells a city, and for a long time, people bought into it without hesitation. Sunshine, palm trees, opportunity, and the promise that anything could happen if you just stayed long enough. For decades, LA attracted dreamers from everywhere, people chasing careers, creativity, and the idea that this was where success looked better on camera. But lately, more and more residents aren't chasing dreams anymore, they're chasing exits. The first problem is cost, and in Los Angeles, cost shows up everywhere at once. Housing prices climbed beyond reason, rents followed, and suddenly even well-paid professionals found themselves living paycheck to paycheck. You don't need to be struggling to feel squeezed in LA, you just need to be normal. When a city requires exceptional income just to maintain an average life, frustration builds fast. Then there's transportation, the silent tax on time. Los Angeles isn't just spread out, it's exhausting. Hours disappear in traffic every week, turning commutes into routines of stress and wasted energy. People plan their lives around congestion, not convenience. And after years of doing it, the mental fatigue adds up. Great weather doesn't feel so great when you're stuck in your car staring at brake lights. Public safety and visible disorder have also become part of daily life for many residents. Not everywhere and not all the time, but enough to change behavior. Theft, vandalism, and encampments became harder to ignore, and with that came a sense that problems linger longer than they should. When residents feel like issues are managed instead of solved, confidence in the city erodes. Los Angeles also suffers from a unique kind of contradiction. It promises freedom and flexibility, yet daily life feels rigid and constrained. You need a car for almost everything, space is limited, and simple errands take far more effort than they should. What once felt exciting slowly starts to feel inefficient. Remote work accelerated everything. Los Angeles used to justify its cost by being where industries lived. Entertainment, media, tech, and creative work demanded proximity. Once that requirement weakened, many residents realized they could keep the income and lose the pressure. Cheaper cities offered more space, less traffic, and fewer daily frustrations, and suddenly the trade-off didn't make sense anymore. Families felt this shift especially hard. Raising children in Los Angeles means navigating high housing costs, competitive schools, and limited space, all while dealing with long commutes and rising expenses. Many families didn't leave because they wanted to. They left because staying no longer felt sustainable. Businesses responded as well. Office space downsized, storefronts closed, and entire commercial corridors lost energy. A city built on constant movement and visibility struggles when activity slows, even slightly. Los Angeles depends on momentum, and momentum is harder to maintain when people start questioning whether the lifestyle is worth the price. Los Angeles isn't failing because it's unattractive. It's failing because it's demanding. It asks residents to sacrifice time, money, and peace of mind in exchange for an image that doesn't always match reality. The city still has talent, creativity, and global influence, but those strengths don't cancel out daily frustration. People don't leave Los Angeles because they stop loving it. They leave because loving it becomes too expensive. The magic wears off when survival requires constant compromise, and the dream loses its shine when it starts feeling like work. Los Angeles will always attract newcomers. It will always look good from a distance. But for many long-time residents, the decision to leave isn't emotional. It's practical. When quality of life becomes harder to defend, even perfect weather isn't enough to make people stay. Detroit isn't a city that people casually leave. It's a city that has been left behind so many times it became part of the story. Once known as the engine of America, Detroit didn't just build cars, it built the middle class. Generations of families came here for stability, good wages, and a future that felt guaranteed. At its peak, Detroit symbolized industrial power and economic confidence. Then that foundation cracked, and the effects never fully stopped. The decline didn't happen overnight. Factories closed, jobs disappeared, and population dropped steadily over decades. As work left, people followed, and entire neighborhoods emptied out. Homes were abandoned, schools shut down, and city services struggled to keep up with shrinking tax revenue. Detroit became a cautionary tale long before it became a headline. What makes Detroit different from other cities on this list is time. San Francisco and New York are losing people now. Detroit has been losing people for generations. That kind of loss reshapes everything. When population drops far enough, normal city life becomes harder to sustain. Public transportation weakens, retail disappears, and even basic services become inconsistent. A city built for nearly 2 million people now supports a fraction of that, and the gaps are impossible to ignore. Safety has been an ongoing concern. Not everywhere and not constantly, but enough to shape behavior and limit opportunity. Large areas of the city remain underdeveloped, and the absence of investment is visible. Vacant lots stretch for blocks, and empty houses stand as reminders of what used to be there. When people talk about Detroit, they're often talking about absence as much as presence. Detroit's housing tells a complicated story. On paper, it looks affordable, even cheap. But low prices don't always mean low cost. Many homes require major repairs, and infrastructure challenges add another layer of expense. For newcomers, the risk can outweigh the reward. For longtime residents, staying often means enduring conditions that would be unacceptable in stronger markets. There has been recovery, and it's real, but it's uneven. Downtown and a few surrounding areas have seen investment, new businesses, and renewed interest. Young professionals and entrepreneurs have moved in, drawn by opportunity and low entry costs. But recovery that reaches only certain neighborhoods doesn't stop population loss citywide. A comeback that isn't shared feels fragile. Detroit also struggles with perception, and perception matters. Even when improvements happen, the city carries decades of negative reputation. That reputation affects investment, migration, and confidence. People don't just move based on facts, they move based on stories, and Detroit's story has been hard to rewrite. For many residents, leaving Detroit isn't about chasing something better. It's about escaping stagnation. It's about wanting reliable services, safer neighborhoods, and predictable opportunities. When people feel like progress is slow and uncertain, they look elsewhere for stability. Detroit isn't a city without value. It has history, culture, resilience, and a community that never fully gave up. But resilience alone doesn't stop population loss. Cities don't survive on grit, they survive on opportunity that reaches enough people to matter. Detroit teaches a lesson that other cities should pay attention to. When jobs leave and leadership fails to adapt, people don't wait forever. They leave quietly, steadily, and permanently. Once that cycle starts, reversing it becomes incredibly difficult. So when people leave Detroit, it isn't sudden, and it isn't shocking. It's the continuation of a long trend rooted in economic shifts that were never fully addressed. Detroit didn't collapse, It faded, and fading is harder to fix than failure. Detroit's future isn't sealed, but it's uncertain. Recovery is possible, but only if it expands beyond small pockets and reaches everyday life for ordinary residents. Until then, Detroit remains a powerful reminder that cities rise, cities fall, and people always move toward where life feels more stable. Cities don't lose people because of one bad year or one bad decision. They lose people slowly, through rising costs, broken promises, and everyday frustrations that stack up over time. San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, and Detroit are very different places, but they share the same warning sign. When enough residents decide the trade-off isn't worth it anymore, they leave. This isn't about hating cities. It's about listening to what people do, not what they say. Moving trucks are data. Empty apartments are data. Declining populations are feedback. People go where life feels more manageable, more predictable, and more sustainable. Some of these cities will adapt. Some won't. And some will continue surviving on reputation while quietly shrinking in the background. The future of American cities won't be decided by slogans or skylines, but by whether ordinary people can afford to live ordinary lives there. I'm Senior State. If you want the truth about where America is growing, where it's shrinking, and why people really move, you know where to find me.